Hey everybody, and welcome to Everyday Intuition with Brandon Russ. With me as always is TC. Tracy, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys doing today?
Good. We're going to be doing this podcast is going to be fun. You've seen a few of our podcasts now, you've seen them kind of unroll, and, we talk about really cool things like labyrinths, and we, talk about chakras and, kind of everyday intuition things. Well, what better way to think about how intuition is used every day than from a parenting angle. And Indigo Children were introduced in the early 1970s. And it was thought of the idea that the world was suddenly being infiltrated by children that were more light than they were flesh. I mean, in a nutshell, that's kind of how Indigo Children work. They have certain traits and tendencies where they are highly emotional. They understand emotion very quickly, and then they have an advanced learning to it as well. Some people make the argument that they come into this world with an advanced knowing, while others actually talk about how they just have complete divine connection and things can come to them on a regular basis. And today what we're going to do is actually have a panel of other Indigo parents, as they're called. And Indigo parenting is really kind of a unique thing in which you really need a set of tools in which to work with your child. What I find most Indigo parents have is that they have an innate ability to be able to, really kind of understand their children, and then also be able to help them at any given time for, whatever it is that they might need. In other words, they have gift themselves. So with that in mind, there's a lot of people that have a tendency of dismissing it. I mean, first of all, let's say this right up front, all of our children are gifted in some way or another. But Indigo children have a tendency of how they use their gift, what they're meant to be. And being that Indigo parent, it takes a certain set of skills in order to, really kind of foster and nurture where it is that they need to go, because their mission isn't necessarily what they're born into, but what they're born into is very important. So, Tracy's actually going to be half participant, half producer today as we start to kind of roll this out. We also have with us Kate. Kate, hi, how are you? How are you doing? I'm terrible with the muting and the unmuting thing. You guys know that.
I got it covered.
Yeah, there you go, because I'm just terrible with that. For whatever reason, my buttons don't work. Don't say anything, TC. Also with us is Colleen. Colleen, how you doing?
Hey, everyone, how are you?
There we go. There we go. And Chelsea, who's smart enough to actually hit the unmute before I actually come to her. Chelsea, how are you today?
I am well, thank you.
Good, good. So, first thing kind of into the discussion, a lot of people ask, how do you identify, your child as an Indigo? And, some of the Indigo traits and I'm really looking for the discussion to really kind of bring out all the traits instead of just listing them and going down. What are some of the traits that you saw your children or child have that made you go, wait a minute, I got to start paying attention to this, and I might need a little different approach than what Dr. Spock told us? Kate, go ahead.
I think I have a unique advantage because I was told early on, before my son was even born, that he was going to be an Indigo child. So I got a chance to research it a little bit. That's where I came to the realization that I probably was an Indigo child myself. So I was, I'd like to say I was prepared, but who's prepared for parenting, period? I knew he was going to be, I was told he was going to be challenging, not in a behavioral way, but in a knowing kind of old soul kind of way.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon thing to hear too. You also, it's funny, I find people do this all the time. They recognize it for their child, and then they take classes or they start to build a recognition, and they realize that they kind of had those traits as well. Another thing you had said that somebody had told you, I'm guessing a medium.
She was a medium, yes.
I'm telling you, the world's greatest source of energy.
Yes.
Here we all are. Cool. Colleen, how was your experience?
Well, it's funny because I hadn't really even known what an Indigo child was until recently. And upon learning more about it, I realized that while my daughter isn't a textbook case, she has definitely started, and since she was very little, shown signs and traits of an indigo child, specifically by how sensitive she is. And she seems really, she's highly emotional, extremely intelligent, and just really in tune with that kind of stuff. And as I'm looking back, I am now remembering things and evidence of that along the way. I just never knew how to put a name to it. So it's been something that I'm kind of learning as we go along, and I'm realizing that how I'm dealing with her, even now at age 8, is going to be different from certainly how I was raised or my husband was raised. So it's definitely a learning experience.
Yeah, and I think that's also something where, it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's definitely one of those things that, like, once you start to acknowledge it, you absolutely need to, recognize that they're, they just told you that they need something different. So you just feel compelled as a parent to give them something different. That's an interesting thing as well. Chelsea, what about you?
Well, I have 2 children. Well, I actually have 3 altogether, but 2 that show signs very strongly. One of them, like Colleen's child, is very sensitive to everything. I mean, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and people's emotions, he can feel them. So that's
Is he the one that will, like, hug people in Walmart?
pretty much, yeah. He totally would.
That's one of those behaviors that are just, it's endearing. You're like, oh my gosh, there is hope for the world. And meanwhile, they're just walking through like, da, 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 I'm hugging strangers.
Yeah.
And then you're like, you're taking a look at them, and not that we're passing judgment, but, let's not talk to strangers. And they'll, your beat on them is different than their beat on them, because you're seeing, you're seeing it through the eyes of experience. They're seeing it as in, like, this person just wants a hug.
Yes.
And there's something very endearing to it, and it's, it can get dangerous for sure. Anything else to add there, Chelsea?
Well, he will actually, even just seeing people, and he can tell, if somebody's in a bad situation type deal, he could end up in tears because he can feel it. He's 9, and he's been like this his whole life. But then my youngest, my daughter, she, on the other hand, she like sees things and talks to things. And I've often found her when she gets very upset in the corner talking to somebody, or if I have put her in the timeout, she'll start talking to somebody. Hold on just a second, honey. Not right now. But
you invoked her.
That was the middle one, actually. He came down for some sweets.
Oh, there you go. Well, they're also chiming in going, you don't think I'm an indigo, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
I'm going to come get you. Not right this second, later, okay? But really, it's kind of those things.
Yeah, for sure. Tracy, what about you? How did you really kind of, what are some of the things that you see personally?
I know it's very similar to what Kate said. I know Kate and I had taken a class a bit ago, and she had mentioned about, like, being raised in as your parent thinking you're an indigo, and I was definitely dealt that. I had a single mom, and she had kind of this Renaissance style, try anything that you want. I tried basketball and Girl Scouts, and I took comic book art as a 10-year-old girl with teenage boys, and, wish I kept up with it kind of thing, because I was like, why are we drawing women like this? And that was way early than, like, what the social norms are now. But just, free flowing, if I chose to do something, my mom was like, sure, let's do it. Let's back it up, follow through kind of thing. And just kind of kept that as a parent. Thomas, he has, like, seen spirit very early. Like, when he was little, he held waffles up and said baka. Now, that's Yugoslavian for grandmother. No one on earth would have taught this 2-year-old, 18-month-old, whatever he was at that time, that term, but he said baka, which was my mom. And she was been in passing, and he held his waffles up to her, and I stopped. I froze. I started crying. My husband froze because he's like, how does he know baka? I'm like, I don't know who taught him baka, and nobody taught him. When my grandfather passed, he drew a picture of a house with me, my husband, and him. And Dan Paul was up above the house, and he said he's watching us. And then that's it. He didn't go revisit it. And it's not until recently, when talking about indigos, that I really like started looking back into them as we were going through classes, and just started seeing, like, you know, we just can read each other. You know, I'll be in the room, I'll be working, and he's like, "You need a hug," and I'm like, "I do." And then there's times where he does drive me absolutely up a wall. I'm not going to sit here and be like, "Oh, it's Donna Reed, everything's great." No, he drives me crazy. He'll ask a question, and if he's not satisfied with the answer, he'll find a different method in which to come back at the same question with different wording so that he can get the answer which he is seeking. And I'm still on him, like, I get what you're doing because I do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. No.
It's
Like,
funny. Well, a couple of things there. It's funny. I did not know that baka was a Yugoslavian word for grandmother. I had a niece that used to call her grandmother baka beka, and it's, I don't know, something to that past life stuff. It's funny how past life stuff comes up in this as well. But what, Tracy, you bring up the behavior part of it, and Colleen, I want to come to you first with this. It's like, how do the behaviors, like, how Tracy just said it was like, yeah, you gotta, I need my space. I mean, they're great 1 minute, and then they kind of turn on a dime. Talk about your experience with that.
Well, I was finding once my daughter kind of got out of the real babyhood or the toddlerhood, she would have moments where she was just really emotional and sought out comfort, physical comfort, needed hugs, needed a lot of, I will say coddling, even though that's kind of a, not quite the right word. But then I've noticed in recent years, maybe it started around 5, when she gets overwhelmed, when it's just all coming in at once, she doesn't want that. She actually is like, I need space, and she needs to kind of just shut down. And sometimes she'll just go up to her room and she'll write, or she'll even just get on the iPad and play a game, because she just needs to have everything just go down for a little bit. And then she can kind of circle back around.
It's funny because that's that's certainly a telltale sign. I mean, I probably should have said this at the top of the show. I'm a certified parent coach, so I can I coach with parents about strategies and techniques, that sort of thing. It's one of those things that you end up doing when you're a foster parent, then you become an adoptive parent, that sort of thing. But I'm also a recovery coach. Not that your 9-year-old is throwing them back yet, but what happens? Yeah, hold on a second. You throw back your hair and you're like, Jesus, Brandon, don't tell me that now. No, it's all good. It's all good. Just be worried when you're like, Mom, where's the shot glass? It's like, this isn't a past life moment. Please cut it out. But no, and part of the reason why I became a recovery coach is because what I found a lot of times, I wanted tools in my toolkit to be able to talk to people about why it is that they went down the path that they went. Of self-medication to the point of some level of adherent destruction, if you will. And when, you were just describing how your child kind of goes through this, I'm going to shut down, I need my space type of thing. That's actually incredibly healthy, because if they're forced to go through it, they haven't let their body rest. A lot of the things that we do with meditation, with your parasympathetic and your sympathetic to help it rest, with an indigo child, their triggers are energy. Their triggers aren't necessarily, I mean, they have the natural triggers as well, of maybe feeling unsafe or abandonment, that sort of thing. That's a totally different topic. But they're sensitive to the energy, which is what really kind of draws it to it. So if you're helping her, make a, conscious decision and giving them the boundary to be able to say to them, if you need 10 minutes, you need 10 minutes, but we're not avoiding anything. It's still going to be here when you get back, and, here you go. It takes another level to coach them through it. But that first step of, hey, you need space, is incredibly important. Mm-hmm. So that's why I don't think he's going to, they're going to want thimbles of, shots of Bailey or.
Well, it's been a struggle too, because I've had to learn that. For me, it's like, oh, something's wrong. Let me just pick at you or drill into you, until you kind of reveal it all, and I can then fix it for you. And I've had to learn to back off and give her that space, and then come back around, and it is working so much better because then she's had time to actually be able to formulate and explain, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, rather than it be such both of us being at a heightened emotional state where it's just escalates into just meltdowns, you know?
Yeah, that's a great way. That's a great way to put it, because it does escalate the meltdowns. It just naturally happens. Chelsea, what about behaviors for you? I mean, you got two of them. You're double barreled there.
Well, I have to say, honestly, everything Colleen was just saying explains my middle child like wicked.
So you have three. Can we just admit that you have three now, for crying out loud?
I mean, wow, because to the point where he will totally break down. I mean, all of them do that, but he gets so overwhelmed very easily that he will have meltdowns like crazy. And I didn't really connect it till you were saying that, honestly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kate, what about you? How are behaviors for you?
You know, it's a lot of what Chelsea and Colleen have already said. You know, especially when Colleen was talking right at the end there about changing your parenting style. You know, I think that as moms, and dads too, but parents want to make things better for their kids. And when they're headed down those really painful paths of they're overwhelmed, they're overstimulated. It's really hard to not just kind of put your arms around them and fix it. That's what we want to do. That's our inclination. But being able to step back and recognize how important it is for them to take that quiet time and use it, to learn how to use it appropriately. That was probably one of the hardest lessons. Yeah, and it is a really, really important skill. So you know, we take that fast forward when they're little and they're with us, we give them that quiet time. Now in school, we've learned that when Matt gets overwhelmed, or if he gets behind in work, it's important for him to have a quiet place at school where he can go and concentrate on his work. So being able to use those supports that are outside of the home as well to help him manage it, not just within my four walls, has been absolutely critical, you know, academically.
It's funny because you're bringing up the whole dynamic of schooling, and you know how cooperative are schools to understand what this is. I think it is, you know, and I'm gonna jump here and say that, you know, ADHD is incredibly misdiagnosed, and you know, but I also say with the caveat that it's also appropriately diagnosed often. So it's kind of like, you know, to rule out that, oh gosh, it's just a blanket thing of, you know, a lazy teacher that wants to push for a kid to take a pill. I'm here to tell you that there are scenarios that happen like that. I also think that there are scenarios where even as an indigo, they may need some medication just to get them through this, because it's that much. It's that much, but you also have to have an exit strategy for that medication as well. And in the rainbow and unicorn world, that's not a popular statement because it's always, you know, conspiracy laden, and you have to, you know, let them just be themselves. We still have a role as a parent to help them be functional in the world that we live in. And that's a delicate balance that we're always kind of forced with, where, you know, as much as they want to curl up into a ball and you know, just not participate, you have the responsibility to say the work is still here. You can, you know, maybe when we plan to do it from 10 to 11 today, it doesn't work for you, but you've got to find an hour this afternoon to make this work because it's due tomorrow. That actually helps them and benefits them as well. Without, you know, and I preface this with saying that the medical community by and large is now really opening up to this. Even in my work, I've been speaking to psychology students at all levels, from you know, undergraduate up to PhD candidate level, and speaking to them about at least opening up the idea and identifying the particular traits of ADHD as well as indigo children, that there's a lot of overlap and it often gets misdiagnosed, you know, because of their high motor, because of their high, you know, reflexibility. What I really think it comes down to 100%, I say this, I've been saying this from the beginning, is how the parent conditions them and allows them to own what they are and who they are, and be consistent with their progress to own it. just like anything, just like if you have personal anxiety or you have, insert whatever, thing du jour. If you kind of appropriately start to teach them the things that they need to do or know, then they can own it. And again, the medication may or may not be necessary. I don't wholesale say it doesn't work, or I don't wholesale say it's dangerous. I think it's both, quite frankly. But it really depends upon the situation. For me, I think everything's time bound. I have a 13-year-old who, came to us when he was 4 years old, and through the course of recognizing that he needed stability, really toned down a lot of his behavior. But then there's other emotional, things that came out of this. Whereas my 8-year-old, who, I literally helped him the day after he was born, he just, cries at the drop of a hat, emotionally connected. He's the one hugging people in Walmart. And then, the 7-year-old has this way about him where he's like this emotional overdrive, where he's just like, sorry, I'm going to bring this up. The spiders in the house need a home. Isn't it great that we have a home for them? And then we're like, and then you're like, yeah, that's great. Daddy, why are you pushing him outside? Well, he's got to make his own home, okay? And just like you, when you turn 18, you got to make your own home. Like, the spider was 18, I had to kick him out. So I kind of mix my metaphors in my teaching style, and my parenting style. But Chelsea, I want to come to, and Tracy, do you have anything else to add with that? I want to circle back around.
Yes, sorry. I do. I think that in hearing everyone, we hear about the behavior and we want to put a label on it. It's so important to us. I mean, that's why when we had Thomas go through his 2s and 3s, and we just were like, this is great. Maybe we should have a second kid, it's good. He really didn't have a good experience in kindergarten and school, and that just unleashed anxiety. It unleashed tantrums at 6 years old. Like, so here's a super tall, really big kid having these tantrums and this anger and all this stuff, to the point that we took him medically to see if he was on spectrum, and had him tested. And, we're horrified as parents. We're like, these are the behaviors we see. And it was funny because in the interview with the doctor, I had an emergency C-section, so I had no clue that Thomas was a blue baby. I had no idea until that moment in the doctor's office. And I'm like, if I'd known that, that would have explained so many other things.
Interesting.
And yeah, it is interesting. But come to find out through all of that medical experience for that 1.5 years, he had anxiety. We met a psychiatrist who has been phenomenal with him. And as Colleen said, you change your parenting. Instead of being like, what do you want? You say, what can I help you with? It's a matter of just changing your tone. It's also brought us into more meditation, more taking the time. Like even with schooling, we have to, schooling at home in recent weeks, we have to let's preset before math. Math is a struggle. Let's stop, and even 2 minutes, let's breathe in and breathe out and set our intention, and then move forward.
Sounds like mindfulness in the classroom, that's for sure.
Mindfulness in the home classroom, yeah.
Yeah, right. There you go. Wow. Welcome to this. The Russ Elementary is thriving right now. We're doing very well. We have some moving up ceremonies here in the next couple of weeks, and here's the funny part. I came to find out that I don't have the final say if they go on. So, I was like, I did all the teaching here. But Tracy, you bring up an interesting, point about this with medical professionals. And we talked a little bit about how the teachers kind of being, coincide. How do you build a team? And, and this is very much about even coming out, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, when I started doing this mediumship work for a living, I really had to come out because people knew me as a different dude, a different person. Well, walk through kind of the idea that you need to kind of bring it up to a teacher or a doctor or even a psychologist. My kid's a little, I don't know if it's almost like you don't want to say it, like you bring them to it, and you want them to say, are they gifted? And you're like, yes, thank you. And they're like, well, prodigies exist. And you're like, not that kind. And it's like you kind of, bring them through. Chelsea, can you talk a little bit about like what challenges you've had, if any, about, trying to build that, like with the, with the team around them, so to speak?
Sorry, say the first part again.
Yeah, if you could talk a little bit about like what, any challenges that you've had building the team around them, like from teachers to medical professionals to, even relatives.
Well, a lot of our extended family, I have to say, has a lot of signs of things like Indigo Children, but maybe different stages, how others have come at different years type deal. So my family and everybody, they're a really good support system with all this. And a lot of them actually have good ideas of coping with things or just ways of parenting that would help them. Teachers, it depends on the person. We had a really great teacher this year that just knew my oldest is a very heartfelt, emotional child and just looks out for him. You know what I mean? Right. Or another year he had a teacher that was actually telling the kids to shut up and she was mean. And that whole year was so much harder for him in school.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on the person and how in tune they are, I guess. And if they're willing to listen.
And then you go back and you think about your own, because I don't think that you receive an Indigo child without any gift. Like, I think you can't kind of be that, wavelength of like nothingness now, at least kind of in our generation, where we might be, in that space where our parents might not have gotten it or got it at a various level. We needed to get it, for them. I mean, I remember, I went to a parochial school. My second grade teacher was just brutal to me. I mean, brutal. I felt more like I was in like military deconditioning, than I was in school. And, as a nun, that was her job. Then in third grade, I had this teacher that was just all about, tell me what you feel today. It's like she recognized that the entire class had gone through like a year of trauma. And then she was the perfect teacher, after that. And she really opened me up. And then of course I freaked her out when she was out for a week and her mother had passed away. And then the week she came back, I came up to her desk and said, Mary Ellen is very happy that you're back in school today. And Mary Ellen happened to be her mother. And it was very kind of like, it's the only time I ever got sent home from school, quite frankly. But she still embraced it though. Afterwards, she said to me later, she's like, did you have a message from her? And I'm like, I don't know. But she was like one of the first people to say, like acknowledge that she actually got a gift in that. After she flipped out a little bit, after she cried a little bit, she took it offensively because she thought the school was sharing what she had been through, type of thing. But it's kind of interesting. Kate, what about you? How do you build a team?
So I have not had the fortune of building a team through being very transparent about my beliefs in his gifts. So I've been forced to kind of go the more traditional Western medicine kind of route. Matt did really well in school where there was a little bit stricter teacher that tended to keep the noise and the commotion in the classroom calmer, and he did well with that. In order to build the supports, though, when he kind of fell off the table in 4th and 5th grade and really struggled with what his providers would call mental health conditions, that's when we were really able to utilize the traditional school system with a 504 plan and a safety plan and those types of things to get him the supports that he needed. I have yet to find a functional medicine person that I can work with either on his medical health or his behavioral health that is receptive to the type of things that he's seeing. As an example, or the things that he's experiencing, as an example, he sees things and can't explain them and they frighten him. But when I talk to a psychiatrist about that, or his pediatrician about that, they're saying, oh my gosh, it's major depressive disorder with psychotic features, and you have to medicate that. That's very dangerous. And I'm saying, wait a minute, like I've been seeing things since I was little, and this is like no big deal to me. So when you say it's a hard balance, it really is a difficult balance. As a mom, I want to get him the support that he needs, and recognizes sometimes that's not going to be me. But in order to find somebody that's open to the idea of him just being gifted and just, yes, he's seeing things and it's disturbing to him because he can't, as Tracy said, put a label on it. Help him through things like I had to.
Yeah, is it that they can't put a label on it, or they're limited with the labels they can put on it? And that's what
yeah, that's absolutely it. They're limited to the labels that they can put on it, and not necessarily open to that it could be these gifts.
Well, you also validated what I had said earlier insofar that had you not had your gift, whatever various level it is that you have, paying attention to your intuition, realizing that there's something more that you're connected to, all of the things that make us intuitive, it really makes you the perfect indigo parent, because as much as you're still going along the lines of the Western medicine, you're also kind of recognizing like this isn't all that there is. So maybe it is meditation at home, but we've got to do the school thing. For me, that's why I never villainize the medical, thing. I villainize laziness. I villainize the idea that a teacher just wants the kid medicated so they get through the year and they can push them along. I've seen. That drives me crazy. I've also seen parents go, just give them the pill. Just, put them whatever. It's like, and it's, George Lopez has that joke, that's forever, old about the joy juice. And it's like, everybody's going to have a little Benadryl. Everybody's going to get a little NyQuil. Like, but I'm not sick. I just have a little bit. It's funny because it's absurd, but that's kind of what we're doing sometimes with them. And it's the balance part of this too, you bring up a couple of things, first of all, that you have to have gift in order to parent a child with this. But then the other thing is how do you identify that? Have you had like awkward conversations with, providers? It sounds like you did a little bit when, you're trying to bring it, but what about other medical professionals where you're like, he just, he's talking to dead people, or he's seeing these things, like,
they kind of look like they want to commit me, and I'm concerned that there's going to be a call to CPS or something that mom's hallucinating, and I don't is it going to be safe to send the kid home with this whack job? So I tried very, very carefully. I consulted with some friends in the behavioral health profession and posed the question, where is there room in the traditional treatment of what we would consider behavioral health for the appreciation of kids that have these gifts? And instead of give them the pills so they don't see the man in the window anymore and they're not talking to their dead grandfather, embrace that and have that conversation. I was fortunate enough to have a mom who appreciated my gifts. They freaked her out a little bit, but appreciated them. And she approached them with a sense of wonder and, wow, that's really cool. And what did they say to you, and those types of things. So I've been able to do that with Matt and say, I'm not scared of them. They're not here to hurt you. So let's talk about how we're going to, this is just part of our life. This is what we do. And how are we going to get through that? And fully embracing this piece of him and understanding, Brandon, like you said, he's got to exist in current society. And he's not always going to find people like me or the people on this panel who are very receptive to that. He has to figure out how to, manage his feelings of overwhelmed, manage his anxiety. When you say things like, maybe we're not going to do it from 10 to 12, giving him that control back to say, this is your deadline, this is your project, and this is your deadline. I don't really care when you do it, but it needs to be done by then. And giving him some of that control back is really helpful. I am not yet, though. Like I said, I'm still searching for providers.
Well, that's the perfect, combination parenting model too, because, we are instructed, as parents, like to be age appropriate. You always hear the term age appropriate when it comes, when it comes to parenting, like, but age appropriate also means in the age in which you were born, because once upon a time, I used to get the beer from my dad from the fridge, and I used to get a sip when I was able to, right? I'm not the only one, right? Don't report my parents now. It was 40 years ago. It's all good. But here I am today, and I can't drink Meisterbrow. Anyways, love you, Dad. So, yeah, you bring up a lot of the things that, with the balance part of it. Colleen, what, in building a team, how have you been able to do it?
Well, it's funny. The recent events have really driven home just how important a team outside of the confines of your home is. How important that is, because we can't always be the end all be all for children like this.
Right.
And I've realized how fortunate we've been with our school system, where my daughter's had some really great teachers who have been sensitive enough and in tune enough to recognize when someone is struggling emotionally or with anxiety, and not having that kind of old school way that I grew up, where you just kind of suck it up and put your nose down and plow through it. Which is a lot, that is the environment I kind of grew up in. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and it was like, hey, you don't feel good, it's, you're going to school, or what, it wasn't a what's going on with you type of thing. So, and the teachers were like that as well. So we've had with my daughter times where she's been anxious, and she's had, my stomach hurts, my this, and I've gotten phone calls from the nurse, and, we've had to go in and try to figure out what's going on. And a lot of it has been, I've looped in just the school nurse. Listen, this is some of the things that Riley deals with. Her teachers, the school counselor, who has been wonderful and has been, especially in recent weeks, meeting with her virtually and giving her tools as to what she can do to help manage how she's feeling during these times. And it's been fantastic. She's got a set of grandparents who are very open-minded to this kind of thing. My parents are not as much, but that's okay, because she can balance it out with me. So just having this kind of smattering of people that she can turn to and say, I'm struggling, I'm having this, and not have someone just go, you just got to deal with it and suck it up. That being said, there is a balance that you do have to find. And I know Kate was saying this, where she can be feeling sensitive and overwhelmed. And there have been times where I've taken her and said, babe, you got to do this. You got to do this. You've got the tools, you know what you need to do, but you've got to, get on that bus, or you've got to do whatever. And it's a very fine line, and we're tweaking it. We're tweaking it every day sometimes. So
it's, and it's incredible too, because how you're talking about those, the comparison and the root is really important. And this is worthwhile to, kind of bring up, for a whole host of reasons. But with, they were born to you for a reason. There's no two ways about it. There is, there's purpose in having one set of grandparents that get it and one set of parents that don't, but they still bring a set of tools to them that they're going to need. And we might not see it, and we're best served if we don't judge it, if we just kind of be like, oh, well, it's just the way they are. It's like, you want to be angry, you want to be upset, and are you right? Sure. But how much right are you going to be if they can't see the grandparent because you ticked them off because you're like, you don't understand my kid. They may miss the beauty as to why it is that they're that set of grandparents to them. And it's, that's the balance. I mean, you keep talking about balance, and society-wise, as a dad, that whole suck it up buttercup, mentality. I mean, we all had it at different times, at various levels, but even all of this discussion, I guarantee you somebody's going to listen to this and be like, this is why we got cupcakes in America. And they, it's like, we got to toughen them up and we've got to do whatever. This is, society, the arc of what's going on in our country, not, current events notwithstanding. But if you really kind of watch what's going on, I was of an ilk at a time where I was in a graduating class of like 300 people, give or take. I forget what the exact number was. and there were exactly 5 kids that went into the military. And we had a, we had a recruiting captain or whatever they were called come and talk to us, and talk about how America won't be a superpower anymore if we don't step up and everything else. And we all just kind of looked around at each other and went, all right. Like I watch an entire generation go, I don't want a gun. Now I think this current generation is literally sitting there going, yeah, about that whole, I need to, do I have to shoot people? And we criticized Muhammad Ali for saying, he did it on religious conviction, but there's something to be said for this entire, kind of indigo class, if you will. If they're under, they're under 20 right now, this entire indigo class doesn't feed into any of that. Where that kind of 20 to 40, we're kind of like, I'm kind of lukewarm on the whole thing. And I'm not saying it's not prestigious, and I'm not saying it's not important work, but the philosophy at hand is that doesn't necessarily serve them. And that's really my point to this. Like, if it doesn't make sense to them, they're not going to do it. So that may make them look like it's, that they're being difficult, or they've got an attitude, or they've got a behavior problem. But in reality, it's like, you're saying, listen, hon, you got to go to school today. It's not serving them, but they still have to function in the society. So the extra stuff where it's not a function in society thing, they're not even going to touch. They're not even going to go there. It's, it's an amazing thing when you start to see that, generationally what happens in society and how it implies, or it impacts rather, how that group of society or that generational gap, begins to respond to it. That's why you've got people that are really, really angry with their student loans. They came in, they were told education was the king. They get their education, and then they were unemployed, and then there's, bank fallouts and blah, blah, blah. They become disenfranchised, and then they start to think to themselves what's really important. And then they're like, well, they're just potheads, or they're just, whatever. They're not. What they are is they're not subscribing to the things that we keep pushing as a society. Well, listen, guys, this is a perfect spot. We're going to take a break for just a couple of minutes while you listen to a word from the sponsor. And when we return, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about how chakras with the Indigo Child and how the Indigo Parent chakras are really supposed to work. So stay tuned. We're going to be right back. Awkward pause. This is the part I edit. By the way, you know who the sponsor is? I'll give you a hint. This is what the vocals are. This is what the audio track is. Well, guys, I love to talk. Did you also know I love to make music? I know, right? You're kind of laughing. All right, we're gonna come back in 5, 4. Are you guys doing okay before we come back? You guys cool? Okay, cool. In 5, 4, 3. All right, everybody, welcome back. I really appreciate that you guys have stayed tuned for this. I hope that you really like our sponsors. A few things that, that I like to really, talk about in my Indigo parenting class, and anytime I really help people understand their connection to things. I like to talk a little bit about how, how the Indigo Child works. And I just want to kind of bring up, and preface this with understanding that our chakras are really a philosophical understanding of how our physical body acts and reacts with points and centers of energy in our body, from our root up to our crown. If you're not familiar with them, you're about to get a little bit of a crash course in it. But it's really important to talk about, not only from the perspective of the indigo, but then also from the perspective of the indigo parenting, because both have a responsibility and they lie within the chakras. The first things first, and I'm actually going to do a little bit of a share screen here, which, by the way, don't we just love this whole Zoom thing where we can jump back and forth? Thanks again to another fun sponsor of ours is Zoom. So I want to actually talk a little bit about the, kind of the structure of the Indigo Child portion of the chakras, when they receive things, up here in the third eye and the crown, we're a giant antenna for reception for spirit, whether it be from our creator, our angels, our guides, the people around us, whatever the case may be. Our entire body is an antenna. But in particular, when you really focus in on the, on the throat chakra, on the solar plexus, and then of course the heart, these center chakras are really the operating center for an indigo child. I think it is for most people as well. But with an indigo child, they'll receive information right here into the, into the solar plexus. And this is their gut feeling. This is how they operate initially. They may get the experience of like, hey, I think this person's not going to be nice to me, or hey, I have a great, feeling about this. It doesn't always necessarily have to be negative, but it's meant to be a teaching tool for them. And, what happens is that they get that initial feeling. It goes up to their throat chakra where they have to have an action. Sometimes it's words, sometimes it's actual physical action. Sometimes it's creating boundaries, sometimes it's acceptance. But then that comes down and they get their validation into their solar plexus. And that's what protects or hurts their heart. So just as a little bit of a basic understanding of how these chakras work, it's up to us as as an indigo parent to be able to really kind of encourage that decision making going along. And down here in the, in the lower chakras, although I'm talking about past life here in this one, into the root and the sacral, it's actually our parents' responsibility to guide them. It's our responsibility to show them the culture they were born into. It's our responsibility to give them, whether it be religion, whether it be, just the things that you do as a family. That's part of what they chose for this part of the journey. And with that conversation, you also help them feel safe while doing it. So it's, this will lead to them making decisions. This will lead to them, finding their passion in life. That's what the, that's what the sacral is all about. So the root is what they're born into. The sacral helps them make the decisions, and then understanding how the solar plexus, the throat chakra, and how it impacts the heart. That's our responsibility as indigo parents. It's a really important thing to recognize that this is really by design. And I think, I'm going to come back to the group here. I think that a lot of people, when you look at old parenting books, you talk about expectations and implementation, the idea of having 2.3 kids, white picket fence, she's a nurse, he's a doctor, blah, 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 blah. We get into that whole kind of construct of things. And then you actually have a child, and then you realize that this, quote, gift is landing right on top of you. I think I want to talk a little bit about, like, when have you noticed that your child has had to really, learn that the actionable parts of what they're getting is really important, whether it be through a lesson, whether it be in day-to-day routine. When has that been, something that you've observed over time? Chelsea, do you want to go first? No, okay, Trey. No, that's okay. We can.
Can I go second?
Yeah, sure. Tracy, I know we've talked about this. What are moments where Thomas is like, you see those chakras in action, let's say?
That's a really good question. As I'm sitting here, I think sometimes it's very clear for him when he gets stuff and he's just like, whoa, what was that? But then I think he's a little like me, where he gets something, he says it, and then it's just like, what was that? Where'd that come from? I know for him with the anxiety, I know, like, trying to help him with his sacral, or not his sacral, sorry, his solar plexus, as I'm sitting here thinking about 10 other things. His solar plexus, like trying to comfort him in security with his sacral and his root, but also trying to help him, use his voice, trying to help him, speak what's he feeling? Why is he feeling that?
Do you use meditation with Thomas?
I do. More recently, when I started learning Reiki, he had said to me, I said, I tried to offer him a couple times, like, oh, I try Reiki. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that. But then one night he had like a really bad, like, anxiety attack. And he's just like, do it, just do it. Just, and so I put some little meditation waves on with a bell, like a sound bell, that I know he absolutely hates sound baths, but I put one on only, and it would ring, every so often through the meditation. But I went over his chakras, I grounded his feet and rooted, and grounded him, and went through all his chakras, and, did the Shokurei and the Seiki, and, then, did one more Shokurei to close up the session, and he passed out, like, for the night. And the next morning he woke up and he's like, "What, Mom? Whoa." Well, I just laughed at him. I was like, what's wrong?
Recognize what you did, though. What you did is you centered him, and you put those chakras in balance.
Yeah, centered him and unleashed the child to be like, "Hey, are you free to Reiki right now, Mom? My ankle's kind of hurting. Oh, my elbow, I hit it. Can you Reiki this bruise away?" And I'm like, doesn't quite work like that, bud. But, we have those moments where he's just like, a little frivolous with it. But he also he's open to that.
Yeah, things that Reiki do not work on. Bumps and bruises, it can help. Oh, there he is. I hear you're going into hairstyling, kid. Right? Things that it won't work on. Things, if you don't believe in it, it won't work on anything. The Philadelphia Eagles won't help them win. But it's a type of thing where, and the point I really want to emphasize with this is some of the tools that you can develop as a parent. You did it perfectly. It's you grounded him. You let him relax. You did the mindfulness piece of it, where you let the parasympathetic and the sympathetic balance, and you gave him a rest, which he'll avoid the PTSD of constant stress. And then you also grounded him in, which is a very root sacral thing for you to do. So as an Indigo parent, to be able to ground your child in whatever way it is that you need to, thumbs up.
And I also think it's important to be open. Like if, when I started taking intuitive development, he had a lot of questions for me, and he was like, well, how does this work with church? And how does this, and I know where some of those questions came from, because he picks up on everything around him. But when we had like more one-on-one time, through the quarantine, we've been able to like go for walks and see nature and see signs. And, he's been super receptive to that, because I'm like, I've said to him flat out, you may not like it, you may not agree, but you have to respect that somebody has a different viewpoint.
Well, isn't that just teaching moment 101?
Yeah.
All the way through. Kate, what about you? What are some of the things? And Chelsea, Chelsea, you want to go first? Yeah, okay, all right. I want to go last. I always want to go last.
That's me, all right? Whatever.
That's good. But Kate, where have you experienced that?
So I started to experience this with Matt really early on, even in preschool. He was in a home daycare for a number of years. And then when he went to a more classroom style, getting ready for kindergarten, we talked even at that age about the importance of advocating for yourself. So did I say, your throat chakra and those types of things? No, but right. Looking back on it now, that's really what we were talking about, is him being able to ask questions and express himself, and really kind of opening that up for him. I think one of the most important things that I've done for him as a parent, not to toot my own horn, but just recognizing how important, when you talk about the sacral chakra and feeling very safe and feeling very protected. I'm not a Reiki practitioner. I wish I was, because what Tracy did sounds amazing. But what I have done is just make sure that he always knows that he has a completely safe place with me, and he can say things that, normally wouldn't be said outside of the home or outside of our four walls, but we can talk about really powerful or polarizing things, or even just very simple things that he's feeling. And he gets a very consistent response from me, which is usually very welcoming and very questioning, helping him kind of work through it a little bit. But always has that kind of that reassurance that whatever he wants to explore, whatever he's happy about, or whatever he's struggling with, it's okay to come to me, and I'm going to put my arms around him, figuratively or literally, and we're gonna talk about it.
And it sounds like it's a broken record a little bit, but you're creating a safe space for him. You're creating a spot where it's like, I'm going to go for it here, but it might not work out, but I know I can come home to this. And, age appropriate at 13, 14, 15. And, at 16, 17, 18, you have to start kind of going like, well, you got to figure this out. I'm still here, but I'm going to figure it out. At 7, 8, 9, you're kind of like, you try and get them in touch with that feeling. Let them be able to vocalize it. Let them get them to it. That 10, 11, 12 feel is more of a like, okay, like, let's hear what you would do. Let's hear what what your steps are. And so it's kind of like that building thing. And some of it is, coincides right in line with the, Dr. Spock suggestion, parenting method, but it detaches a little bit because you go to this part where now you're considering energy. Everything you just said, Kate, you're considering energy. Tracy, you're considering energy. All those examples are there with that. Anything else to add right here, Kate? You're cool. Well, Colleen, by proxy, you're next.
So what I've noticed is that Riley has gotten good at knowing when she needs to calm herself down. She's got some crystals that she grabs, and she will just hold them in her hands and just kind of center herself. And sometimes I'll sit with her and I'll just help her focus on, hold them. What do they feel like in your hands? I don't go into the whole huge vibrational thing. It might be a little over her head, but what do they feel like in your hands? Focus on what they feel like. And she's now gotten to the point where she knows that she can go to those and hold them and help her get to that place where she can center herself and feel safe. And then from there, my big thing with her is I want to work and be aware of her throat chakra, because I think she has a tendency to clamp down on what she needs to say or what she feels like she can and should say about how she's feeling. So I'm trying to work with her there about making sure that always feels clear for her. And we've worked together with it. And it's been pretty cool because I know when she's getting overwhelmed. And there was a school event back in the fall, and there was a lot of people and a lot of craziness. And it was almost like I watched a veil fall over her. I could actually see her body change. And I had been smart enough I brought with me to school a couple of her crystals. And all I did was without anyone seeing, I slipped them into her hand. And I could see her just kind of, just kind of relax. And so she then, by holding those crystals, just provided her own safe space, and then could then work on, are you okay? And we kind of whispered and talked about it. So that's my biggest focus with her, is getting those areas of her kind of clear so she can move forward and function at a school or an event or whatever is overwhelming her.
Oh, that's pretty intense. Tracy, do you want to add something in there?
Yeah, I just want to chime in. Like, I totally agree with Colleen. Like, I don't want to give like every aspect of everything I do, but we gave Thomas some crystals, some tourmaline, some onyx.
Oh, there we go.
Trying to ground him, but like, he's drawn to the amethyst. We had the amethyst that we used, like one of the first meditations we did, which was a rough piece. Yes, and then sometimes he loses them. And I said, well, the universe has taken them back for whatever they need, and they will come back to you in some way, shape, or form. But he had this piece of rough amethyst.
Way to not be confrontational right there. Like, as in, the universe came calling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just say, you got to take some disappointment. There is that balance of, I'm a little disappointed that you need to take care of your things. However, it is what it is, but
what a great lesson on a $2 crystal, right?
Yeah. And he takes the rough amethyst with him all the time. So, I mean, he he'll pick the amethysts up, and
Yeah.
and like it's funny how it slowly turned into like a shape of a heart, even like how he uses it. So that's all.
That's kind of cool.
I think that's awesome.
No, I think that's another great point to this, and it's a great parenting tool as well. Crystals kind of have this reputation in this work of, like, oh, it's mystical, and it's like, get your crystals together and that sort of thing. Now I'm going to drop the science on you, and that is because they are energetic beings. Us as people, we're energetic. The crystals actually create a metric where there are controls in place. So instead of getting inundated with all this energy that you don't necessarily know what it is, by holding a crystal or being in the presence of crystals actually allows you to have a constant with the energy that you're feeling. And by, having this, and by the way, this is my new best friend. How about that for a hunk of?
Wow.
It's a hunk of burning love right there. Along with my, my EMF deflecting, smoky quartz. I always need to be grounded just because this is how I work. I mean, I had to learn this myself. As much as my parents were not, negative to this, they didn't have the tools like we do. So one of the things I've learned is that when I've got a hunk of black tourmaline around me, when I'm busy up here, like down here is still kind of safe. So again, another tip and tool from Indigo parents is to have crystals, and they don't have to be expensive crystals. Amethyst, I mean, it's $2 crystal. A hunk like this isn't even $10. So you can be, and oh, by the way, you may actually spark their interest in geological stuff. Like you may actually kind of get them a little into science and talk about things like vibration. And by the way, there are whole web pages about the vibration of crystals and rocks that, you could easily turn it into a science project. So Chelsea, we're all on a panel. We've got to come to you. All right, kid. So how do you use tools? And maybe it was divine timing that now that we brought up crystals and talked about different techniques, what are some of the things that you found that are effective for your guys?
Well, I find that they need grounding a lot because, like I said, they feel their emotions times 10. So anger, sadness, whatever it is, it's very strong. And they use stones a lot. They'll go and just pick out of my little bag whatever one they feel they need. They sleep with them under their beds. We're the kind of people that will walk through the woods and will walk around and hug trees or bring home pine cones and stones just because we like them and they're pretty and they make us feel good. My oldest, though, loves smudging. He likes his feet smudged. That is something that relaxes him so much. And with the feet, I don't know what it is. I remember reading something about everything being connected there. And that's one thing that'll calm him and just ground him. And
Chelsea, you hit it right on the head because your feet, like when we do Reiki and you do Reiki on the feet, that's meant to ground you back to like whatever you're reaching out or receiving, it brings you back down. So it sounds like he's bringing himself back down in his own way.
Yep.
That was.
Yeah, and and the other part of this too is, thank goodness he's able to communicate with you what works, because that's also something too where, maybe it's just you being the parent going, oh, I know this works. I know this is, what we're going to do. But it's, you recognize he goes back to it though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, that's his way of communicating with you on that.
Yeah.
So that's a really kind of cool thing for me. As an Indigo parent, and it's funny, I'm an adoptive parent, so these kids aren't my genes necessarily, but they are my energy. And when I start to kind of interact with them and I really learn the different personalities and I connect with them on different levels, first of all, I'm having the time of my life with it, but second of all, it's also like I almost think I have an advantage over somebody that had their own kids and and they've got like, oh geez, they're off the radar and they're a little out there and they're whatever. I can just sit there and go, not my genes, I didn't do that. I'm just pulling it together. By the way, I can't go through the whole thing and not make a joke about them, but I think that these tools are kind of within our reach. And I think that when you don't forsake the science part and the medical parts of it, but you look for the alternative pieces of this, I think it's a dangerous precedent when we say no to all things medical, because, you know, we fail to recognize that we have Western medicine developed to a point that works on empirical data and works on things that show us, you know, that it works. I think we get hung up on the conspiracy of things, you know, too much sometimes. Instead of looking at it as a conspiracy, just accept that sometimes people put stuff they shouldn't in our, you know, in our vaccinations, or, you know, that we've got fluoride in our water and, you know, all that other crap. But instead of looking at it as a conspiracy, just do something about it and avoid it. There's plenty of options kind of around things now that you can begin to kind of, you know, go that route. On the other side of it, I think this is something that's important for anybody that's viewing this right now. You're actually part of a bigger, you know, collective than what you think. I think in my walk of life, the Indigo part of this, I merged it because I'm like, oh, I started doing the reading, you know, 15, 20 years ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. And then I started to realize, like, what are some of the tools out there that people need? Well, there's a lot of good resources out there. And even on the Spiritual Connection page, there was a whole section of just Indigo parenting, Indigo kids part of it. I would encourage you to visit that. But there's other great authors out there as well. You know, and the reason why I bring that up is, you know, have many different aspects of your influence here. One of the first things that I saw was a documentary called The Indigo Evolution, which really talks about how the Indigo kids are really taking over the world, and it's about time for us to kind of move out of the way. You know, but Nancy Trapp actually was one of the first people to bring forward the idea of Indigo Children. She also contributed to understanding, you know, the difference between crystal children and rainbow children and that sort of thing. Those are great, fun fodder to talk about, but I think we kind of miss the point if we try and categorize it. I mean, one of the challenges that we have in society is that we're all segregated anyways. Let's just accept them, that they're gifts, that they're meant to be on a mission, that as an Indigo child, they are really, truly meant to change something in this world, even if it's just ours. You know,
Chelsea,
so instead of categorizing and segregating them out.
Chelsea, you had a book. Chelsea had put up a book while you were saying names. So I was just asking her what book that was. Sorry, Brendan.
No. And Doreen Virtue, before she, you know, I don't know if she's come out about what her views are on Indigo Children. You know, she certainly denounced the whole angel thing, but you know, and this is how I approached Doreen Virtue's work. You know, during this time, she wrote it for a reason, and she was meant for us to hear it. So whether she denounces it or not, she said it. And you know, one of the aspects of that book is she really talks about the divine nature. I've actually read that book. Hold that up again, because she's got like 3 of them. She's got 3 Indigo ones, the care and the feeding of the Indigo. Yeah, she actually talks about the techniques that you need in order to, you know, really approach it. And this actually leads it to the next topic I want to bring up. And that is, what about their diet? What about your Indigo child's diet? You know, I have a 7-year-old that is addicted to a fast food restaurant that I will not name until they become a sponsor. You could become a sponsor because it has something to do with adoption. But anyways, did I just guilt trip a corporation? Did I just do that? Are you guys like kind of, either you're amused or you're like, dude, come on. But I have one kid that, that's addicted to the 4x4 meal. And then another kid that will just eat cantaloupe all day. Like they can't get enough fruit in them. But Chelsea, I'm going to start with you this time, because you got the book and everything. So talk a little bit about, like, how do you mix that up? And you're, even before the, the quarantine time that we're, eventually going to come out of at some point, you're with your kids pretty consistently anyways. How do you approach diet with them?
Well, honestly, my kids are grazers. They don't eat big meals. They're all very picky. I was the same way growing up, so I kind of understand them. Mm-hmm. My middle child, he would live off liquids, fruits and vegetables, and, chips or candy if he could.
Yeah.
But you can tell when he's eaten certain things. When he eats the candy and the junk food, he gets miserable. He will just be in a funk and in a bad mood, and nothing makes him happy. And you can tell it's just bad for his body, but it is for everybody. I just try and tell them that they have to eat some of the healthier things before they can have their junk. I mean,
yeah, it's,
really,
you know,
that's all I can do.
Now, does he correlate? You were saying that it makes him feel miserable. Have they put it together where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm miserable. I can't eat that red dye. I can't eat those Twizzlers.
My oldest, actually, he does. He had watched this thing with me about a lady that would actually take food and she would place it on her chest. And if it was something that was good for her body and her body needed, she'd feel like a push forward. And if it was something bad, she'd go backwards. And he actually does that with a lot of things now. So he's very, I don't know, cautious of what he's eating in ways.
Who facilitated that for him?
Well, I don't know. It was just something I was watching.
Oh, okay. So you gave him one of those tools where, and what that is, psychologists use that, nutritionists will use it with using your body as a pendulum. Yep. What more energetic value is it than that right there? But you use your body as a pendulum, and whichever way your body reacts, that tells you something about what that means to you. That's pretty impressive, actually.
He is even the one that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
He's even the one I had all of a sudden, my diet has changed over the years, but lately when I've been eating meat, I've been feeling sick, and I didn't realize it till he goes, Mom, you had meat again last night. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it. So even he is so aware of it that he's putting things into perspective for me.
You know, I've had this debate quite a bit, and, stay tuned for a podcast on this one. I think that there's a direct link to opening up your intuition in your diet. Yeah. And, you definitely have this refined salt. I mean, I say this and I come to you today as somebody that has lost, over 170 pounds over my life, weighing 300 and, almost 50 pounds. I will tell you that the refined sugar was really holding me back. I still had gift, like it still came out, but boy, was I exhausted. I could do 1 or 2 readings a day, and now I can do, 8 or 10. I'm still exhausted as I would have been doing the 1 or 2 with the weight, but my physical body had to change. And I find that a lot of things, for me personally as an adult, like a pescatarian diet is really kind of the way to go, with the occasional chicken, mostly fish, not raw fish, although sushi's delicious. But, things like, eating things like cod and eating things like scallops and shrimp and that sort of thing, my body doesn't react negative to it. But if I have a burger, I'm a little down. It's odd. And, vegans kind of take the stance and just from all the conversations I've had with vegans, that, well, you're feeling their pain and suffering, you're feeling, there's the empathic value to it. I am laughing, I'm seeing what's going on. But on the other side of it, there's something to it. So it sounds like even through your journey, you're saying, this is what's working for me. And then, you can pass it along to them, or at least acknowledge it for them. Does that make sense? Are you thinking about going pure vegan, or is it just the red meat thing for you?
I still love meat, so I couldn't just kind of deal with the sickness the next day or later on.
It's kind of like the Irishman going,
right.
I don't drink anymore.
I mean, I try and eat,
but there is that occasional. Listen, I understand it, and it's, and some of that goes into conditioning and that sort of thing, and it is a podcast for another time. But I think it's something at a minimum to find the value in that. For that reason. Colleen, what about you? What are some of the, diet challenges that you have with them, and what do you tackle?
Well, we started noticing, it kind of started with, she was having some physical symptoms. We would notice if she had too much sugar, or she had been loading up on starchy foods. She wanted, pancakes and things like that for breakfast. And we got so we were noticing she would also start having emotional reactions where she would just be volatile or easily offended or upset, or if we would tell her no or so, she would just kind of all of a sudden have this meltdown, and we were like, what is going on? And I was actually starting to keep track of it, almost like a food diary, and what her reactions would be. And we came to associate that when she was having too much sugar or too much starchy carb types of things, she would just get these crashes, which, you know, for some people, a lot of people be like, oh my God, I had too much and now I feel logy or now I feel exhausted. Her emotions would be the ones that would react. And so we've realized we have to keep her kind of like snacked up throughout the day so she's not having like the crashes. We're trying to balance her diet, but she is a picky eater, so it's tough. And she eats like a bird. She's a skinny tiny thing. She eats like a bird, so trying to get her to eat the right things so she'll keep on that even keel has been a challenge. But just the fact that we made the connection finally, you know, she hates this word, but we will tell her, are you hangry? And she'll be like, no, I'm not hangry. And she is. So we're, you know, just trying to incorporate that more into her life. We're finding it works, but it's like pulling teeth because she's an 8-year-old kid who wants her sugar, you know?
Yeah, so she's like Abe Vigoda, and then you give her a Snickers and she becomes Betty White. I get it. I totally get it. I totally get it. Kate, what about you? What are some of the, you know, things that you've seen with diet control for them?
Yeah, this is where my Mother of the Year word, it just like goes, it's completely unattainable now. Because
I am a mandated reporter, but I promise not to. It's all good.
You know, if it comes to a drive-through, it works.
Yeah, listen.
That's basically it.
Listen, though, you know, I mean, here's the opportunity, though. You know, what if you did a full, you know, shift? And I mean, this is how I balance that. You know, so here he is, and he's like, I need a bacon cheeseburger, and I need nuggets and fries, and I mean, and listen, if we're really competing for the Parent of the Year award, I'm getting the fruit punch, which is just liquid red dye. You guys know that, right? Like there's nothing fruit or punch about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you know, but just to let you know, they're like they're more prone for the dye than they are for the actual juice, because I've actually made juice out of, like, you know, mango and papaya and pineapple and mixed it all together, and they were like, this is terrible. And I'm like, it's real juice. And they're like, give us the fruit punch instead. But anyways, this is how then I end up balancing it, is that then I kind of put my foot down and I'm like, listen, we're gonna have nothing but fruit today. We're gonna have nothing but fruit in the, you know, if you want that, we're gonna build it up with fruit. Their digestive system thanks me. You know, the idea of kind of their melatonin stuff, you know, all of the sleep proponents, you know, balance with that. So for me, I use it that way. But you know, but I find them enjoying the fruit sometimes just as much as, you know, as the burger. And that's kind of, you know, now we can also be let off the hook and be like, you know what, we're doing the right thing here. Like, we're balancing them. There's that word again, balance. So Tracy, what about you? You want to chime in here?
Yeah, Thomas, I agree with Chelsea, how she said, like, her kids are as picky as she is. You know, boy, when you say, oh, my kids are never going to be like me, boy, that's the whole calling on the karma and manifesting it right then and there, because he is like, you know, white bread, turkey has to be fresh, like from a turkey, cut off a turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Did I mention it was like, you know, $10 turkey from Price Chopper kind of thing? And you know, he's a grazer. Like, I agree with everybody. He grazes on occasion, like Kate said. He wants to go to a particular fast food that he doesn't pronounce always correctly. So it's funny when he's like, I want this cheeseburger. And I'm like, oh my God.
I think you've been in line behind me, just to let you know.
I think we have.
Yeah.
And then we go back around if they get it wrong, be like, no, this kid will like put a bad review on he'll find a way to put a bad review on you. You better get this correct. But
great. So that's something, you know, right. Give him Yelp.
We are fortunate that he has grown to drink only a cup, like milk, water, and on occasion he drinks like the half and half iced tea lemonade thing. That's his vice.
Sure.
We don't do any soda. And like, to the point that he's like, Mom, I know you're trying to quit soda. You're not supposed to drink that. And I'm like, but I got a migraine.
Right.
But he's gone into a little bit of ginger ale, but we're like currently going through that because he has a lot of physical manifestation of the anxiety with his stomach. So every time he eats, I agree with Chelsea, when it's meat, like he knows, he's like, I just ate, spaghetti sauce with meat. Oh no, I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. And I'm like, it's okay. And like, and he's at a point where, even though at his age, it sounds odd, but like, he is weird about gas. He's like, oh, my stomach. Oh, and I'm like, buddy, really just fart. And he's just like, he farts and then he's like, oh, that felt better. And I'm like, it's just gas. Let it go. Everybody's got it. The whole world.
I'm so going to make that into a meme for you.
Yeah, it's just gas.
Honey,
just fart.
Honey, just fart. I'm going to make that into a t-shirt, actually.
Yeah, but sometimes you don't want to be around it. You're like, oh, good God.
Everyday intuition.
Did the United States government just release like a mustard gas or something? You're like, oh my God.
That's fantastic.
I can't see.
He's gonna be sent to riots in the future to disperse the crowd.
Oh my God.
Yeah, right. There you go. Oh God, it's terrible. Well, listen, I want to bring this home a little bit and bring up a couple of other points that we might not have necessarily done through this very organic conversation about this here today. We brought up Doreen Virtue and her her philosophy was really kind of an anti-ADHD thing. And, she's a doctor as well as a master's, in psychology. And she was very much about her parenting techniques, nutritional management. Chelsea held up the book, and there's still a ton of value into that. Robert Gerard is another person to look up. He's a psychologist, and he offers advice kind of into the loving discipline. In other words, how to really kind of keep good discipline for your child, but still allow them to, keep them within reason. This is great if a child's been, has a diagnosis of, reaction disorders, so to speak, or things where, verbal, they might have been subjected to verbal and physical abuse. They might just have a lot of triggers to that, and the loving discipline really kind of works. So you still kind of get them there. It's a little bit more work, but we're parents, we signed up for it. And Kathy Patterson is a behavioralist. I would really encourage you to look up her work as well. She gives great advice on setting boundaries and how to really kind of do those follow-throughs. She does talk a little bit about, how to kind of keep track. Colleen brought up journaling, the food stuff. But sometimes behaviors are important to recognize too, because you're kind of a work in art. When we go through our work, first thing I tell everybody is get a journal, write it down so you can see what your psychic dictionary is developing, to see what worked for you in that meditation and that sort of thing. I think journaling for your indigo child is incredibly important. And when it comes to those boundaries, it's okay to set them. It's, you need to set expectations, and they should line up with what the expectations are going to be in, quote, real life when they get there. Being able to communicate that. Don't just leave things to be like, they should know better. That's the worst thing you'd say to an indigo child, because an indigo child turns around and says, I just read the Akashics and you should know better. There's that one. Drop that hat. Understand that you have limitations in the equation as well. Maybe you don't know everything. Maybe you have your bias in place, but then also understand their potential. That's incredibly important. We all want our child to grow up to be healthy and happy and just do what they love and find the person that they can be happy with. We're finally to a generation where we can honestly say that and not have bias attached to it, but also recognize that their potential, we might not ever see it and we can't dictate it. They're in charge of that. Also understand where maybe you kind of faltered a little bit before, maybe you lost boundaries, and, even discuss it. That's where the communication comes in. Let them know that it's a teaching moment. And one thing that I think is probably the most important thing when it comes to parenting and indigo parenting, whatever, quite frankly, is you have got to know yourself. You really do. Like, if you're kind of guessing it and being like, I don't really know, and that doesn't mean you don't make a decision. It doesn't mean that you don't say, I used to work for this company, but now I'm going to work for this company. And, things didn't work out with this situation, so now I'm going to be in this situation. That's actually showing that you do know yourself. It's where you waffle, because they can read your energy. If you're coming home angry every night, they know it. If you're, if there's disharmony at home, they know it. You've got to address this stuff head on. And I think it's, you owe it to them, but then you owe it to yourself as well. It's amazing how much an indigo child can be the catalyst for your own happiness, because it doesn't let you sweep it under the rug like, say, previous generations did, which, by the way, may be sitting right in your root right now as we speak. And you're forced to really kind of overcome it. So it's a pretty amazing thing. So Chelsea, Colleen, Kate, and as always, TC, I want to thank you guys for being part of a really cool podcast. There's more to come. I think you guys are great contributors. I've known all of you collectively and individually now for some time, and you've shared with me your path, and I thought you were perfect for this panel. I'm really encouraged. Even hearing these things are things that I didn't necessarily know. But it's important to know that there's resources out there. There's other parents that can talk to you about their technique and that sort of thing. And one of the things we always take pride in is that, we're not crazy. There's something to this. And when we're able to kind of open up and talk to people as a community, it's a really fantastic thing. So guys, I want to thank you for coming and I'm going to end the recording part here. Don't hang up. I'm going to end the recording part here. But as always, guys, since we can't hug and handshake right now, we're going to do the heart tap and let you guys know that we're still thinking about one another and to keep going. So thanks again. Be sure to tune in next week. And oh boy, is next week a surprise, AKA not planned.
Oh boy.
There you go. Everyday intuition. Thanks again. I'm Brandon Ross. Be well, guys.
Bye.
So part where we kind of sit here and we kind of do this. And then we have the exit music and blah, blah, blah. Then we pause it. Okay. So do you want to stop cloud recording?